All right, welcome back to the Bronx Tales, presented by House Enterprise. We got James Boysitz and myself, Will Tondo. We are 4 games away to the World Series. 4 games. I'm not speechless because this is what we're supposed to be. The path was there. We discussed about it before. It just feels good right now. I'm not overlooking the Guardians, but it feels good. Uh, James, I'll just swing it over to you, my friend. How are you feeling? And we'll dive into a little recap of this series before we head into the ALCS preview.
Well, I don't want to be greedy, but we weren't here last year, so now we're here this year. So that's nice to see. And there's no anxiety of the looming Houston Astros, that dominant postseason team that we can never beat, that giant Everest that we can't seem to climb. And while the ideal scenario is to beat them, this year we don't have to deal with them. And you're facing a Cleveland Guardian team that in the past has sometimes given the Yankees some issues, but I think this year we anticipate it to be a series where the Yankees are heavily favored. And because of that, I'm thinking World Series. I mean, I was thinking World Series at the beginning of the year. Kansas City gave me a little scare. I was at game two. I don't think it's a great thing at all when your team is down 4-1 in the fourth inning and you have no faith in them coming back in that game. Not an ideal characteristic I like to have. I like to find in championship teams, and we'll discuss that. You lost me for a
Lost you
second.
for a second, but there you go. No, we will discuss it. But all right, I mean, from your perspective, and I guess both of our perspectives, the past 5 games. I mean, obviously the Yankees came out on top of the Royals, winning the series. What did you love, and what were your concerns?
Well, I'm going to be honest. The things that I loved are probably not that high. And honestly, my concerns are probably more. But I think there's some context to those concerns because the Yankees didn't play baseball for a week. And we saw a lot of these division winners look really rusty in their division series. So the fact that the bats weren't necessarily popping, you could say is a concern, and it's something I'm going to keep an eye on for the Guardian series. But I assume and I think they will get better, and I think the reason why is a mix of the layoff, and Kansas City's got some really good pitching. And when you look at it, Kansas City walked the Yankees a lot, and I think that's the approach to the at bats, and that's something that I found a positive. And I will say, Judge's at bats looked better at the end of the series, and we'll get into Judge because honestly, he is my number one concern. Um, but players such as Anthony Volpe actually gave really good at bats that I was refreshing to see. If you look at his at bats in the beginning of the year versus Houston, they looked very similar to that. He was hitting the ball hard, and other than a missed play he had in Game Three, where they scored 2 runs and Schmidt led 2 runs after that. He made a huge play in that game at the end, saving Luke Weaver a little bit and winning a huge game to carry momentum into Game Four. And Cole silenced any doubts that I had of him not being good in these playoffs in that Game Four victory.
No, and I mean, we brought up the layoff before the ALDS, which we talked about. If the Yankees were sluggish and they lost the series, that was going to be the blame. Fortunately, that's not the case. I will chalk it up to the layoff. I will definitely say there are some pieces where it's like some rustiness, not a lot of pop at the bat, some sloppiness in the base running and the defense. On the flip side, though, the bullpen was nails, and I don't think without that break, the bullpen would have been as effective. I mean, we talk about a guy like Clay Holmes. Clay Holmes, fantastic middle reliever. Fantastic middle reliever. I was definitely concerned anytime he was warming up in the bullpen, but he was the perfect setup man. And then Luke Weaver, I mean, this guy is pitching. He had like a 6+ ERA with the Cardinals last year, and he's becoming the modern day Mariano Rivera. A little bit of an exaggeration, but just in this past series, I mean, 4-out saves, um, playing every day, fantastic outing. I will also say my biggest positive out of all of this, I would say this was a flawless series by Aaron Boone in the manager department. I think he made the right call starting uh, Verdugo in left field. Obviously, a game one hero and fantastic defense. I think he made the right call sticking with Giancarlo. Clearly enough, becoming you know probably one of the MVP of the series, despite sluggish base running and some costly metrics there. Um, I also think too, I don't hate the flip and flop of Oswaldo and Birdie at first base. I would have preferred some consistency, but I think there was some good matchups there. Um, my only one thing I would say is, maybe pull the starters a little bit after a turnaround. We kind of saw that where Rodon and Cole in the first game obviously let up some runs, in spots when they shouldn't have. But I think fantastic series by Boone, and it definitely. I don't want to say saved his job because it's World Series or bust with this team, but it did show that he was a competent manager.
I think that's huge that you say that. It proved he was a competent manager. I've always been of the belief I've been a Boone guy, like I've been a Boone supporter. I don't think like there was any series where obviously there was no series where he was perfect or anything, but I don't think there was any series where they lost because of him. Like it was mostly two holes in the team. This year, he has the best team, best roster in the American League. There's no excuse to lose. And even in game two, they lost that game because they couldn't hit and, Rodon had a bad inning. And, Rodon, let's cool it a little bit in game one. Yankee fans are going to be absolutely going crazy again and tone it down just a little bit, maybe get a win first before you start sticking your tongue out. I didn't even see that when I was there, so I had no idea. I saw it like later on, so he's got to cool it a little bit. But just to talk about the bullpen, I mean, dude, like how different is this bullpen when you got a closer who can add swing and miss stuff? Clay Holmes is a completely different pitcher when he's not relied upon to close out games. And, I'm going to apologize to him a little bit because I was thinking, listen, if he's bad in this series, maybe think about bumping him a bit. But he was excellent, and it's a much needed confidence booster for him because going to the later rounds, going into higher stake games, they're going to need Clay Holmes to be that good, especially against this Cleveland bullpen, which is really, really good.
The bullpen is very good, and I kind of want to dive into what, as we head into this preview segment. Let's talk about the roster first, then we'll talk about Cleveland, and then kind of address some of those concerns, or we can do the concerns after the roster. So I'm in the mindset if it's broke, don't fix it. If it's not broke, don't fix it. I think the roster will be very similar, but there are two names that I'm interested about if they are healthy, how they get put into this roster. Anthony Rizzo and Nestor Cortez. I think you want Anthony Rizzo in there no matter what. Obviously, that's easy. If he is not playing, which is probably assumably, Oswaldo Cabrera and John Birdie slot right in. John Birdie would probably be left off, or no, if Rizzo's healthy, they'll probably keep Oswaldo over Birdie. They might keep both. I don't know what the plan is, but that would be issue or position number one. The second person, Nestor Cortez. I think you need to add Nestor Cortez and additional pitching to this roster, just because of how much the bullpen was used and how this series will probably be more difficult. The question is, who do you take off? And if you shuffle anything else, unfortunately, this might be a hot take. Leaving Dominguez off the playoff roster would be my go about.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think we got to cool with the Dominguez stuff, okay? And we're gonna get into Stanton because Stanton was excellent in this series. But it drove me absolutely bonkers that some people really wanted Dominguez to replace Stanton in the lineup because Stanton's the only guy who hits in October. The reason
I
why the
think
Yankees
it.
is
I
great.
think he could have had some pinch hit opportunities. I don't think replace. I think pinch hit opportunities.
Well, I think taking out your most reliable postseason hitter. Obviously, I get the speed aspect of it because he did cost the Yankees 2 runs in Game 1. But Judge isn't hitting, and who else is going to take on the power of Aaron Judge? It's Giancarlo Stanton, who has a history of hitting in the playoffs. If Stanton's not in this series, like I don't know if the Yankees win it. I'm going to be honest. So I mean, Dominguez, just as far as Dominguez goes, Verdugo showed you some stuff in Game 1. He won a playoff game for you. And we've been ripping Verdugo all year, basically. After the first 2 months, Verdugo has been public enemy number 1 for the New York Yankees, basically, not counting DJ LeMahieu, who everyone knew was cooked anyway. Just anyone who we knew was going to be on the playoff roster, like Verdugo, who Cashman and company were such big fans of. Dominguez's production in the fall proved to Yankee fans why Cashman didn't bring him up when they wanted him to come up right away because Dominguez, maybe so far, he's really just a 2-week wonder.
I don't disagree. And I think exactly, I think there is enough talent on this bench that would result in, a similar, you have guys like Trent Grisham, who I think could still provide value, and they're obviously going to, carry him on the roster as that additional outfielder. I think same with like an Oswaldo Cabrera or John Birdie in that spot. So I'm okay with leaving him off. I think it's just at this point, rather have the pitching depth than an additional bat that's sitting on the bench that is also now ice cold. And the guy hasn't played, like you mentioned, need the consistency there. That's an issue to talk about next year. Obviously, you assume that Verdugo probably won't be on this team. Obviously, hopefully, Juan Soto is on this team. We worry about that later. I guess another name that we haven't discussed that I would consider, but again, it also goes back to concerns and someone who might be cold, a Marcus Stroman. Now, obviously not as a starter. You're going to put Marcus Stroman as a long relief out of the bullpen option. Do you have a question mark for somebody who has not pitched in a couple weeks?
It's hard because if you're going to use Stroman, you're using him as a bullpen arm. And the issue with that is the Yankee bullpen didn't allow an earned run in the Royals series. So is there even any sense in putting Stroman in the bullpen? And I think it's a great question. I think he is on the roster. That would be my guess. Because I think Stroman, he provides that energy in the postseason, and I think I could see him coming into the bullpen and being really good and providing a huge spark for the team. They're also paying him. They paid him to be like one of their top 3 starters, and he ended up kind of falling off a little bit towards the end, even though he had some really good moments in the regular season. He also had some poor moments. And quite frankly, the starting rotation was really good. So it being really good kind of let Stroman fall off in the back end there. If I had to bet, I bet he is on the playoff roster, though.
Probably. So heading into this season, we kind of started to touch about, what we liked, but the concerns that you have. Dive right in.
Well, the number one, let's just go into it. Judge is my main concern. And I was kind of scared to say it because I am a firm believer that Aaron Judge is the best player in baseball or was the best player in baseball during the regular season. Clearly the American League MVP. And I think all the tools are there. I think if he has a great postseason, he's right back in there in that conversation as the best player. It's not like Ohtani's necessarily lighting it up in the postseason. He did have that huge home run in Game 1. But Judge, he's striking out. And that's what we really can't happen. And he's striking out with runners in scoring position, and it's setting the tone for some of these games. Like I said, I was at Game 2. He had runners on first and second. Soto's on base. Glaber's on base. It's like Judge has to do something. And they didn't score in that inning because Judge struck out. It just sets the tone completely. and everything's flat. Now, I don't know if Boone's going to do this, but I would have Stanton behind um, Judge in the cleanup spot. I don't know if he'll do that because of the righty lefty thing. They want to mix things up. I get it. Wells has hit cleanup for a while now and was very successful in the regular season there. Wells had a big hit in this series, but that's really it. He didn't really do much, and he was someone I worried about as not having a great postseason. Rookie, all of a sudden you're batting cleanup for the New York Yankees. A lot of pressure there. And I know the short porch and stuff, it makes sense to have him if he's hitting well. But if he's not hitting well, I would prefer Stanton. But just to talk about, I would just put him there because give Judge a little bit more protection. Maybe he doesn't feel as much pressure to do, so great. Like I have to hit a home run every time he goes to a bat. I have to get a base hit every time. The best at bats I saw from Judge were him making strong contact, obviously, but even some of his walks, just being disciplined, getting on base. And I think if he has that mindset, he will find success, letting the game come to him, so to speak. So I think if he does that, then the Yankees are in a good spot. He doesn't have to hit like 4 home runs in this series, right? He can hit a home run, get a couple base hits, maybe, walk, don't strike out so much, and he can have a tremendous effect on the game. And I'm sure we're going to see Soto elevate. I'm sure Stanton's going to be the same, similar. If dips a little bit, it'll just be a little, I think, and still be a productive postseason player. Glaber's been really good. So my number one concern is Judge. That's because our goal here is to win a World Series, not necessarily win an American League pennant.
100% agree with you. And again, my number one concern, it's a little cliche and it's obvious. It's a obvious answer. You can't leave runners in scoring position. It's so stupid to have to say because it's literally how to win a baseball game. Score a lot of runs and don't allow a lot of runs. But the Yankees, there was glimpses of that in this series where it's like same old shit I saw in June, same old shit I saw in the slump. It's like you leave guys on second and third, and what happens? Juan Soto hits a beautiful double, someone gets thrown out, right? It's stuff like that where, I will chalk it up to the layoff and some rustiness. We cannot have that against the Guardians, especially with the bullpen that they have, because if we can get on base with this bullpen, I will be super happy. But also, too, they're coming in hot where they had multiple high scoring games during this past series against the Tigers. Not to say, our series wasn't great, but there was a lot of low scoring despite the amount of players on base. So being able to attack the bullpen and just the overall starters against Cleveland is something that, again, obvious answer, needs to happen.
I think also another concern I have is the Yankees. You touched on it, obviously, scoring with runners in scoring position. They're going to have to take advantage of their opportunities because if they get down early against this Cleveland bullpen, I don't really have much faith they can come back in games because the Yankees really haven't proven to be. They're not like the Mets where they're like, oh my God, even if they're down like 3-0 and they haven't gotten a hit since the 8th inning or basically for 8 straight innings, that they're still in the game. They don't have that. When the Yankees kind of beat you, they either dominate you or they kind of keep it close. But if they're down like 4-1, you kind of like, all right, what's the plan here? Like, are the bats going to wake up? Now, part of that could be the layoff, but I do think Cleveland, with their great bullpen, they're going to be very hard to hit on with that bullpen. So they can't get down too early in these games, which is why I'm a little nervous for game 1. Cleveland hits lefties really well, and you got Carlos Rodon on the mound, who wasn't exactly – he was awesome in the first 3 innings of his game 2 in versus Kansas City. But, if he's given up, short porch homers, I don't really have much confidence the Yankees can come back. And that's a concern, especially for a team that you expect to compete for a World Series championship.
Yeah, and I will say with this series, again, regular season doesn't matter. The past doesn't matter. I do feel a sense of comfort, and I think this team does have a chip on their shoulder because it's the Guardians and how much postseason history there is between this team, especially within the last 5 to 10 years. A lot of overlap, a lot of familiarity. You know, I'm also I think Aaron Boone brought it up today. I'm sick and tired of people saying that um, Jose Ramirez is underrated or underappreciated. Like the guy is just fantastic and took a hometown discount to stay with Cleveland. Um, but outside of that, I mean, Stephen Kwan, great hitter. Josh Naylor, he will provide a punch. I am not too worried about this. However, I'm not overlooking it. I just have that sense of comfort where it's like I can see this team, you know, unleash. It could be a 10-run game or it could be a 2-0 game.
You said the past doesn't matter, and I do agree, but the Yankees didn't really have too many issues with teams that were good. They had a good record against good teams. And, Kansas City, Cleveland, like they both weren't really expected to be playoff teams. Definitely Kansas City, but Cleveland too. Like, they weren't expected to be a playoff team. They won all those games, but they're kind of like Kansas City. Like they're kind of like this house money team, even though they're a division winner and all that. But they're going against, they're going to get the Yankees are going against another good team pitching wise. Doesn't kill you offensively necessarily. But the Yankee bats are going to have to wake up a bit. But I do think, we always complain about Cashman Boone, and I agree with you. I think it was Boone's probably his best managed series. I can't even think of one Yankee fan that even complained about Boone. I didn't see one angry comment like Boone stinks or whatever, because he really didn't do anything to piss anybody off. But we rip Cashman about the holes in the Yankee rosters and stuff. I mean, the Yankees won a playoff series with Aaron Judge getting 2 hits and Garrett Cole completely like sucking that first game. I mean, I think we have to be fair in our criticisms and our praises, because that's impressive to me that Alex Verdugo chipped in and he, Volpe did some stuff, right? Like guys were effective. Stanton, like how many people were saying get rid of Stanton last year? No, the Yankees kept Stanton, obviously largely due to that contract, but obviously still thinking he has some juice. And Stanton's proven that he's still got a lot left in the tank, especially in the postseason. And, the Cabrera, good depth, obviously some good stuff. Birdie, never played first base in his life, is playing first base in a playoff game. And he actually did a pretty good job. So I think you got to give some credit to Cashman that they were able to win a playoff series. And, Soto was productive, definitely not bad or anything. He could have traded Gleyber. How many people wanted Gleyber Torres gone at the deadline? Gleyber Torres is excellent, man.
Not wrong. And again, speak of that deadline piece, you have a guy like Jazz Chisholm, fantastic defense. We'll need to see a little bit of an offensive uptick this series around. We already talked about our big concern with Judge. I will say 2 things. He's due, and his stats against the Guardians this season, 6 games. 375 batting average, 9 hits, 5 homers, 10 RBIs, 7 runs scored in those 6 games. The past doesn't matter. Just a tidbit to see. Listen, the AL Central, it was a division of surprise this year, and the Guardians have had that stronghold on this division for a while. I still feel comfortable. I feel better than I did last week, especially after seeing a full series.
I feel comfortable too. There's no reason the Yankees should lose this series. They got to clean house, honestly, if they don't win it. This is their clearest path. We talked about it in the last episode. Their clearest path to a World Series. Now, when you get there, you can talk about, how do they match up against the other team? The other team is obviously good too. They're going to the World Series as well, so they're really good. But the Yankees got to get there, because if you're not going to get there, how are you going to get there? And we said this before. Like this kind of is a miserable experience. We're supposed to get there, so even like a victory over Kansas City doesn't feel like amazing, because we're supposed to be there.
No, and one thing we didn't bring up as we're starting to close the page on this, rotation has been announced for the Yankees. Rodon gets the bump on 1. Garrett Cole returns to the mound at home, game 2. Clark Schmidt, game 3. Luis Gil, game 4. I like the rotation. I'm happy with the rotation. I think Clark Schmidt is someone I probably would have given game 1. That was a conversation. I'm fine with Rodon. Luis Gil in game 4, however. Guy hasn't pitched since September 28th. Will be about a month if that timeline matches up, correct? Just shy of it?
Yeah, and here's why I think I would start Gil. I think starting Gil was the right decision. However, and that tells me Nestor is probably not going to be on the playoff roster. But I will say that that's probably why Stroman's going to be on the playoff roster, because if Gil stinks early on, Stroman's probably going to get in.
Have a little bullpen game like that? Yeah. I mean, the rest is good. We talked about an innings count with him all season long, right? He was a little shaky towards the end, especially coming back from the IL.
I would probably, I'm feeling a little bold here. I think it's going to be Yankees in 5.
I'll say 6.
You'll
I'll say
6.
6.
6
Yeah,
because you know why? Because I think it's going to be Yankees in 5, but because I didn't really like how Cleveland played against Detroit, and Detroit, I don't really think was that good. I think with their lack of starting arms, I do think, though, that Game 6 is ideal because Cole probably pitches in Game 6. Right? He pitches Game 2, right? So ideally, if you're closing it out in Game 6, Garrett Cole is probably on the mound there, and I don't think it goes past 6.
Let's hope not, right? Let's hope not. So, Yankees Guardians, first game tomorrow. We'll be tweeting away. I'm sure there'll be blogs on the site as well. That is James, and I am Will. This is the Bronx Tale. We will see you, hopefully, as a World Series preview. If not, we will catch you at the end of the season. But let's go Yanks, and we'll close it out from there.
Yep, and they better get to the World Series, or else we will be very depressed recording a pod talking about the issues and what they got to do.
It would be not a fun one. Not thinking about that now.
Hopefully, we're doing a World Series pod, and we're really excited, and we talk about how the Yankees match up against the Mets or the Dodgers.
Fingers crossed. One game at a time. One game at a time. But we will see you next time.